What's up, everybody? Welcome to Witts podcast. I'm your host, Devin, alongside my co-host, Joe, the show. And today I want to talk about gun violence in America, and specifically kind of the school shooting aspect of it. I think it's a very real thing that's going on, unfortunately, and it takes some discussion because I feel like it's a really polarizing topic.
Well, it's a big topic right now just for the sheer fact that, in Uvalde there was a school shooting, months ago. And I believe last Friday that was in the public knowledge or in the media that they're suing them for, if my memory serves me correct, $27 billion. Suing the law enforcement and some of the cities and stuff like that for their lack of response to that specific situation. So, I mean, yeah, it's a big deal, and it's a very prominent deal in society, unfortunately.
Can you blame them? That's kind of my thing.
No, I mean, it's, obviously some of those things will probably be discussed here, but, the premise of it, there's, by, the media, the calculations, reading on it, studying on it, there's like 77 minutes, I think, is what from start to finish, before the police entered that room. So, yeah, 27 billion is a lot of money, but for a life, that's not really. It's not going to compensate it. But yeah, because they showed their butt that day bad. Lives were lost. And yeah, they should be held responsible to some capacity.
Well, the biggest problem in this situation specifically is that you had parents that were trying to go in there, which I think that kind of gets lost in the heat of things. Whenever the police mess up this bad, the fact that you had parents that were willing to go in there and save children, but people in body armor suits with AR-15s of their own and backup did nothing for over an hour.
Bluntly, in my opinion, and people can say what they want, so before all the haters will say, well, you've never been in that situation, you've never done this, you've never done that. Well, I beg to differ because I have. I've stared down the barrel of a gun more than a couple of times. I've been in the combat situations, I've been in these, and as a matter of fact, I was in Iraq, where a lot of the, that's not what this topic's about today, but just as a premise set, a lot of the weapon caches that they had over there, they held them in schools. It was a cover, but, I could go into that a lot. So all the crap that anybody could pitch back and say, well, you've never been there, yeah, I have. I've unfortunately had to pull that trigger. I've been on the other side of that. So yeah, I say they're cowards because, they didn't go in. These kids didn't have bulletproof vests on. They didn't have, these little kids, the teachers, they ain't trained. This guy and the guy that did this, a kid, adult, either way, but it's an 18-year-old kid, he had no former, military or police training, but these cops were trained. So really, yeah, I look at it as you're being coward because, these are grown men and women that are, whether paid or not, they're serving in the capacity of law enforcement. And with law enforcement, you have to understand when you take that job that you're protecting lives, amongst other things, but your life is to be put on the line. And if you're not, you shouldn't be behind that badge, period, because that's what you're there for. I could get into debates of salary, they compensated as such, but that's not the deal. If you cannot put your life up on the line like you're supposed to do behind that badge, then you don't deserve to be a cop. Get off the force.
Well, and the sad part is I feel like there's a lot of cops out there who have also shamed this incident, and everyone knows that, and rightfully so, cops are a really tight-knit community and they stand up for one another. So whenever you have multiple cops all over the United States that are willing to stand up and say that was awful, and not stand behind people that they usually support, I think that tells you just how bad the situation is.
So you're saying the cops were standing, protecting the other cops, or are you saying that the cops were bashing?
Yeah, so in general, they protect other cops, but in this situation, yeah, it's bashing them for doing the wrong thing.
Well, they can't. There was, if my memory serves me correct, 376 law enforcement officials were on that scene. I don't think that, that's just an overall number at the time it was done. But, I don't know by this second to this minute to this hour how many cops were in place at a certain time. Well, we'll just say there was 30. And that's obviously compared to the 376, that's a very low number. 30 cops. They couldn't handle one kid with a gun?
Yeah. Well, they never even checked to see if the door was unlocked, and that was another big
Right.
problem.
Well, deciphering through that, you're right. I mean, because they're like, well, we have him barricaded in. We've got him barricaded in a room. Well, looking at what evidence is shown now is, that he locked himself in there. They didn't have him barricaded. It's almost like the cops had him. We've got him funneled in there. Great. Okay. Either way, you're still an idiot because you shoved him in there with 20 plus kids and teachers. Like, okay, go ahead and kill them. And we got him contained after that. I mean, come on. That's crap.
Beyond all of this, too, the bigger point I feel like that needs to be pointed out, because it's something that happens well beyond just police, but bad leadership. I feel like you could put any good leader in there, and they know that even if it's just them, they're going to go in there and take care of business, or attempt to.
Sure.
So if you have someone who's in command of over 300 police officers or law enforcement officials, you're telling me you can't go in there and take out an 18-year-old?
Well, I mean,
otherwise we shouldn't be spending all that money on the police if they're not going to use it in times of actual crisis.
Well, sure. I mean, you look at the situation. You got, and I say cowards, and I don't want to, and I'm not making a blanket statement towards all law enforcement. So be clear on that. Yeah. I'm not saying that all law enforcement's like that. I'm specifically, and if they see this, fine, take it for what it is. I'm talking about the cowards who wouldn't go in there, and it was too chicken to do it. Let the parents do it, because there was obviously parents wanting to go in there. Well, there was parents that were unarmed, no guns, no body armor, no nothing, and no training. It was just moms and dads. They were willing to go in there over the cops. Yeah. And that's sad.
Well, and to me, it goes back to leadership. At the end of the day, if we as a country held our leaders more accountable for their actions, stuff like this wouldn't happen nearly as much. To me, it's about a kind of a bigger problem. People at the top being able to make choices that affect everybody else, but not them. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel like that really applies in this situation, in the sense of you have a police chief who, there was definitely other agencies involved from bigger police agencies that could have handled it,
sure,
but the responsibility stayed with him. And so in that moment, rather than trying to be a good leader and do what's right for women and children, well, not women so much, but the children and the teachers inside of those classrooms, he decided to hold back until he had more information. It was just a really bad situation that exposes the type of people that are getting into positions of power, not because they're good at their job or they know what they're doing, but because they know X, Y, Z, whoever, and that's how they're actually there. They're puppets.
Right.
And just like everything else that's going on in politics, school shootings like this start to show just how bad the cracks are in corruption.
Well, I mean, that's where, I think in this situation where, how many ever people is there, and I'll keep it on the low side just to err on the side of caution. And if you say, well, let's say 20 or 30 people, there's not one of them that prioritized, saving the lives of these innocent, people over their own safety. I mean, again, I already kind of said that about, law enforcement should be doing this, but no, not one person there even took the initiative to say, you know what, I don't care, I'm disobeying an order here and I'm going in, and put their life on the line. Well, I can't say that because the Border Patrol did, but as a whole, none of them collectively did that. And so they're too worried about following the protocol, worried about, I guess, losing a job, whatever that may be. Yeah. And I could care less in that situation, that because I can understand a cop worried about losing his job, but personally, again, in those situations I was in, I wasn't too concerned how the military was going to react to the way that I reacted, because you're under fire. I mean, you're not saying, oh, I'm going to lose my job, let me think about this. No, if you think too long, you're dead. Right. And so I don't really think that those things are split, right in the second decisions are being made. It sounds good to say that after the fact. It also sounds good as a coward way out, as a superior, to blame it on somebody else because you were too cowardly to do anything. It's passing the blame on it. Well, he told me I couldn't go in and I have to follow orders. Although there is a level of that is right, but that's the coward way.
30 minutes in though, I feel like I would be willing to make that choice to break rules to save lives. But to me, now because I feel like you can definitely beat this thing to death because there's just so many things that went wrong. That's why I'm okay. Usually it's like, dang, that's a money grab. Kind of like what they did to Alex Jones. you know, as far as his report on Sandy Hook and
Sure.
saying it wasn't real.
Well, I mean, his was a little bit, I definitely don't want to get into that one, but his was a little bit different because he was just based, that was all made up, that was fake.
Yeah.
That was
Even if it
real.
is.
And, this crap is real. And this is something that we're faced with, a lot more than what I even think the public puts out, I guess with the problems that we have. Of course, it's all the guns' faults, which I definitely know we're going to come around to that one too, because I have my opinion on that. But really, we just became complacent in some of these instances is why some of these things are happening.
I feel like one of the easiest things that you could do to actually start to fix this problem, because at the end of the day, it's hard to hire a school resource officer or 2 or 3 to cover schools, especially in small towns like Dewey, anywhere in America. So I do actually think it's a great idea, even though you're obviously going to have teachers who are opposed to the thought of carrying a gun at school to protect children. I know for whatever reason that makes some people scared. That's fine, but if you incentivized and gave someone hazard pay, whatever, to carry a sidearm with them while they're teaching, I think you're going to stop a lot of mass shootings before they ever start, because every kid's going to know before they walk into school, teachers are armed.
Well, I mean, there's some probably there's probably a level of truth behind that, but that sounds so easy, but it's not. You can't just, we'll pay this person an extra $100, $200, whatever you pay them extra a month. Well, but incentivizing don't mean crap, because once you start incentivizing people that have no knowledge in it will start trying to step up to the plate to do something that they don't have the knowledge to do.
Well, I'm glad you say that, because then you just train them. That's the point. You obviously don't want just anybody carrying a gun. Just like to have a concealed carry permit or whatever, you have to take courses to be able to do it, right?
Well, the laws have changed a little bit. Concealed carry. Now in the state of Oklahoma, no, you don't. You can legally conceal or open carry without permits.
Well, in most states that have more stricter gun regulations.
Well, yeah, I mean, when this initially started, yes, concealed carry is permanent. But let me be fair to that. Coming from my background again, and going through the training was a freaking joke. So I got to be fair to it. And I love guns. I love shooting guns. I love hunting and fishing, all that stuff. But I got to be fair and honest when these things are on the table, and it was kind of a joke. But with that being said, should we be so stringent to not let people carry a gun, especially in today's society, to protect themselves? No. I mean, I think they should be. I could care less if they go to training or not.
Well, I think if you're going to be in a school teaching kids, you got to be trained.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you can't just
definitely want to invest money to make sure they're good.
Right. Well, there's enough
a vetting process for whatever, but the point is ultimately it will do more good for kids and safety at schools than anything we currently have in place right now.
Well, I mean, I would agree to disagree with that, because I think there's better avenues to approach that. One of the ways I would approach it is in any city they make it mandated that there be law enforcement. Part of their law enforcement is they have a law enforcement at the school. The school can contribute to the funds of that. There's ways around, maybe not the full thing. There's some things in there that can be done. And quite frankly, because this is such a national level, and we give all the freaking foreign aid out to all these stupid other freaking foreign countries that don't deserve crap for it, keep that stuff internally and start protecting our own students instead of shipping guns outside the freaking United States to go protect a foreign country that we're not even invested in anymore. So start putting the resources, the things that we're shipping over to protect all these clowns overseas. And I'm not talking about our people. I'm talking about, well, hell, whenever I was in Iraq, we're still dealing with that nonsense. How many billions of dollars we funded that? Keep the money here. Keep it on our people first. Protect our communities, our people in the United States. And again, that's gonna cover a lot of these, where you call them resource officers or whatever they may be of law enforcement capacity to put in the school. So there's ways around that.
I would totally agree with you on that. If that was the case, I think if you were looking at teachers carrying guns or having people that are already trained to carry guns and forcing it to be part of their budget to plan for that or to hire officers for that, I think is definitely the better option.
Well, you look at this from just what I said.
They don't even want to try that.
You look at this for what I just said, how screwed up this is. The government will come in and definitely in any of these situations, so will the media for the most part, and blame guns. Now, again, I know that the mental health issues and all these other things will play out here in a little bit, but you look at it, the government is not doing anything about this. They sit there, like I've said before in other episodes, they'll sit there and complain and complain and complain, but they do nothing about it. Now here, for anybody out there in social media land or even from the government, I just made you a good proposition. We'll see what happens with it, you know. But I'm saying there's things out there that even the average guy like myself can think of. So I know there's some brain people out there that can come up with this stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's not an excuse for this stuff to be happening. It's simple. You walk into a school with a gun, you should be shot.
Yeah.
Let's err on the side of caution. And once you start making that precedent, if you come into a school armed, you know, I'm not saying you know, some dummy forgot. You have a gun in your hand, there's no questions asked. Shoot and kill them.
Yeah.
You'll set a precedence real fast across the whole United States of America of what happens.
Yeah, maybe shield like the first person to do it, so that way it's like cemented in law that, hey, if this happens, it's on you.
Well,
you know,
let me explain why I'm taking such a harsh stance on that. Is because we have a lot of laws in society that I think are good laws, and if the laws were implemented, it would prevent some things like this and other things from happening, but they don't enforce them. That's the problem.
Like what?
Well, I mean, just for instance, you throw somebody on a protective order. What it comes down to the courthouse, do you have money to fight it?
Right.
To me, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, totally.
You know, I'm not saying everyone's like that, but you can buy people off. You don't even have to go far in the government to see all that nonsense of paying such and such people off, making things disappear. It's not a government conspiracy. This stuff happens all the time.
Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yeah, it's out there. So, you know, all I'm saying with it is we have some good laws in place, and we should start enforcing them. You know, like murder charges that we'll just plea out and reduce it to this and that. No, charge them with freaking murder, give them the death sentence, and be done with it. You know, I mean, obviously there needs to be facts. There's a lot more there that makes it sound so cut and dry, and it shouldn't be so cut and dry. But on the same hand, if they're convicted, they went through the court of law, they went through the law of land, they need to start enforcing the laws we have,
right?
And it would help with some of these things.
Well, and that, you know, if anything, that kind of takes me to how in the world is it still going on today? You know, and because you look at it, you know, we have social media now, so shouldn't we be more connected than ever? Shouldn't we be able to share love to each other? But no, that's not how high schoolers and middle schoolers work. And I'm starting to think that social media is doing exactly what it was intended to do from the beginning, which is to drive people nuts. You know, it's
well, I mean, one could say that
you're intoxicated, you're addicted. It's like a drug. You know, you can't put the thing down. Almost every teen is hooked on it in some form or capacity, whether it's TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Well, you use the words that we're more connected by social media. I disagree with that.
Well,
I think we're more disconnected.
Yeah.
And so there's a big disconnect, and there's too many freaking snowflakes out here or butthurt or pansies, or I could use some other words too that I'm not going to, but they get too butthurt because, you know, of something, and they're like, well, you know, and I'm not saying that whenever I was younger was a thing to do. You know, you beat the crap out of each other, you shook hands, you went your way. That's just what it was. We didn't stab people, we didn't shoot people. But now, that's the thing. You know, you go at somebody and you fight somebody and you beat them, they're probably going to come back with a ball bat. And then if that doesn't work, then they're going to come back with a gun. I mean, they'll kill you.
But here's why.
And so
here's why though, because in today's world, like what you're talking about, you guys saw each other at school, went home, did whatever, and then you came back to school the next day and saw them again. Now, school goes with you in your pocket. And so you get home, you post a cute picture of you and your dog, and then before you know, you're getting crapped on by all of your peers because, you know, you didn't have your makeup on, or you don't look the greatest, or you have a stutter, whatever. They start making fun of you. So it becomes cyberbullying really fast. And so before you know it, you're internalizing a lot of anger that you have for your oppressors. And with social media having so many echo chambers, if you're a young, troubled person, it's not hard to find the dark web, and where you get some nasty comments from a lot of people who could even be government agents.
Well, sure. I mean, there's a lot of dirty stuff out there. I mean, and things that happen. I mean, these things, when it comes to these, well, specifically when it comes to these, I say mass shootings, just school shootings, but these people are not mentally stable. You
Not
know,
wrong,
and
clearly.
and the thing that everybody wants to point to, we should have stricter gun laws. What does it matter? If somebody is mentally, has a mental issue, they'll kill you with a hammer, kill you with an axe, kill you with a knife, kill you with a broomstick. A gun obviously is convenient, quicker. I'm not going to run from that argument, but if somebody is mentally deranged, they're going to use whatever. It doesn't matter what the tool is. They're going to accomplish what they intended to do. Now, I think some of it, there's a lot of clout, glamour, and stuff like that coming that I believe is fueled from, and I'm not going to say is the bigger part of it, is like video games. People, for whatever reason, in this stupid society we live in, it's like they want to reenact it. So I'm not going to put it all on the table and say it's video games, cut the video games out. But there is a level of that because it looks cool.
I'm willing to take it a step further than that. I think it plays back into media. You have every time a mass shooting takes place, it'll be on the news for 3 or 4 days. Whereas maybe a scandal or whatever about a particular CEO, you get one segment for 5 minutes. So what I'm getting at is that they glorify the mass shootings. And so that obviously is a huge problem because young people who are feeling bad about themselves and have maybe thought about already doing this before, then they get on TV and they see a guy killed 19 kids and 2 teachers, and he's on the media for a week. He's famous now amongst the people that enjoy this kind of carnage.
Yeah.
So do you see what I'm saying? How it clearly,
yeah,
I mean, a
it's
shadow of a doubt, it plays a gigantic role in how these kids think about it, rather than actually thinking about the consequences and the repercussions, the glory or the fame that's going to come with them.
Well, it really, in the way you described it, just shows exactly what I just said, a mental illness. Because, a normal, rational person is going to say, hey, I want to get famous. Okay, do a podcast. Become a singer. Go to Hollywood. Hey, let's shoot up a school so I can become famous. That already says alone you've got a mental illness. You're not thinking logically, And so, to sit there and think that person wouldn't do anything, they're a ticking time bomb. Now, the $1 million question, how do you figure those things out? In a lot of these situations, even the one that happened in Vegas, that guy had a clean record. There was nothing indicating, he was crazy. This situation, remember correctly, there was nothing. He was young kids, and you're like,
no, they called him school shooter.
Okay, well, in that case,
No, he was labeled a
well, he
shooter.
might have been labeled that, but that's not enough. Unfortunately, I think I've met a few people that I think that might fall into that category too. Be like, it's an odd duck. But there's nothing, no formal charges, nothing criminally, nothing was there in that aspect. And like I said, so some of these things they don't have enough there to do it. So how do you deal with those situations? That's a $1 million question.
Well, first and foremost, I think the schools can do a lot better job of focusing on students' mental health. If you're going to allow social media to influence these kids' lives, there needs to be a countermeasure, because everyone knows at this point, it's not a secret that it causes depression. It causes these kids to have low self-esteem, low social skills. And so in that, why aren't the schools, but they want to talk about gender or whatever else is going on, but they don't want to actually get to the root cause of the problem, which is they're sad, they're depressed, they have nothing to really live for.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we do to fix that? Well, I think it starts with even something as stupid as a questionnaire. Because if you are mentally ill, this is how I look at it, you're more likely to say, I'm not feeling well. Yes, I have suicidal thoughts. Because you're already at that point. Who cares? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and so even though you might not get all of them, you're going to start to get more than what you got right now.
Sure. And I still think, and I've already said this, but I'll say it again, but it's just another point that I think that invalidates what I said. We're shipping all this money out of the United States, our money, to go deal with nonsense, but we're not taking care of our own. And we need, like I said, and I used a reference a minute ago about, putting officers or trained people in school. Well, again, here's another applicable situation where you're using it to have, people that are trained to help these students. And the thing of it is, a mental health type counselor doesn't have to be at every school. I wouldn't even say that. You could probably have maybe 1 or 2 per district that's available to come in and say, hey, this kid's really having some trouble. And I know what the schools are going to tell me. Here's what the school's argument is going to be in any situation. Well, we have counselors. Really? Your counselor, even tell you what your damn counselors do. What your counselors do is they come in, are you on track to graduate? Did you do these classes? Those counselors, as much as I appreciate them, I'm not knocking them, but they are not, in the capacity that I've seen, they are not positionally there to deal with these type of suicidal or very severe mental illness cases. They are not qualified to do it. They're there to keep a kid on track to graduate. Oh, your mom and daddy did this. Okay, well, you know, not that those things should be taken lightly either, but there's some difference between, you know, a bad home life to a school shooting. They're both bad, you know, and they need to be handled, but those things have different levels of attention that they need. You know, dealing with the Department of Human Services because there's a child welfare case is different than dealing with, you know, in this situation, you know, whether 19 people dead and plus 2 adults, 19 kids and 2 adults. Okay, I'll deal with DHS any day of the week before I want to deal with now 19, you know, young kids that's passed and have to answer for that. So I know that there's a big comparison there, and they need to be people trained that can handle these severe mental illnesses that's out there. And at least at a minimum, because what I see happen in society is it's easier just to pass them off to somebody else. Call mom and daddy, well, you know, hey, he's doing this. Then it becomes on mom and dad to take him to a better doctor. Now, if you live in an area where we live here, you know, we're not, you know, in the middle of nowhere, but when you want good psychological help, you're going to have to drive an hour or two to get it.
Well, to make a few points from my side, you know, you were kind of bringing up having mental health professionals or whatever in the schools, and I remember my wife used to work for a mental health place, and they would do exactly that. Now, these kids were troubled in a different way. They had anger issues, you know, kind of developmentally behind or needed some more help or one-on-one time, and so this company would come in and help those students, but that's another company coming in and doing it. I'm sure there's bigger schools in America that have a school therapist just the same way that college campuses do. But maybe we need to be changing the type of school therapy that we're applying to these kids.
Well, the school therapy we have today is a joke, because the school therapy we have today is kiss their butt and make them feel good. And that crap needs to stop. Yeah. No, I'm serious, it is. If you say something, it's like, oh, you know, we don't want to get them butt hurt, so we just kiss their butt and play along. Now, that stuff needs, there's a thing called tough love. And a lot of parents, a lot of teachers, a lot of staff, administration, law enforcement down the road need to learn it, and they need to learn it quick.
Well, yeah, no, I would definitely agree that kids are less resilient than maybe they ever have been. And, you know, there's a lot of things that go into that. You know, whenever you look at a world where you can push a button and food comes to your door, or it brings you your favorite books or video games, like you literally never have to leave your house essentially if you have the money to do it. And so in that, you know, you make soft people. I'm pretty soft, but they're softer.
Yeah, and there's parents out there like myself that I can make push a button on mine and make it all stop. And a lot of parents need to learn that. Yeah, I know it's hard because you're gonna have to tell your little Susie, your little Johnny, no. Well, get over it. They're your kids. Who wears the pants? You know, and I know that it sounds like, oh, we're going on a rant. No, I'm not going on a rant, because some of these situations would be prevented if the kids were taught right. If the parents intervened. We talked about this last week when we shot our last episode about bad parenting. Some of this stuff, not all of it, some of it would stop if the parents would actually be involved in these kids' life. Some of this would be corrected, and I think the vast majority of it, if parents actually stepped up to the freaking plate and started doing stuff in the school system and being a voice instead of a problem.
Well, and that's kind of one of the things that I thought about was, you have people that get on social media and they'll make comments about how everything should be, how this is wrong, whatever else, but they aren't actually willing to go to the school board meeting to make it happen.
Yeah, listen, man, I just dealt with that crap last week in the town I live in. So, you know, I'm not going to get into specifics on it, but yeah, everybody wants to talk on Facebook. Everybody wants to bash this and bash that. And I went to the defense of the school. And I'll tell you, I went to the defense of the school. Was there errors that the school made? Yes, there was.
Well, just give some context too for what the situation is.
So the school went into a non-emergency lockdown, and there was some miscommunications, and there was supposedly a guy reported with a gun. In fact, there, as the story would go, there was not a gun. Now, to me, those things, they are relevant, but here's what happened. The school went to lockdown, most important thing, okay? And the threat, the problem, within a reasonable amount of time, and that's what I said in the social media things, that what's a reasonable amount of time? Your amount of time is different than mine, okay? The guy was off campus, he wasn't a threat, okay? The most important thing is, the student called this in, whether it be a student or a teacher, somebody called it in, there was a threat. It was recognized, the school went to lockdown, and for that given situation, there was the best it could have been. Now, the issue with it was there mistakes made? Yes, there was some mistakes made. It was not this was not a drill, it was a scenario that happened, but we learned from that. And when we learn from that, and people will stop getting on social freaking media and actually being a crybaby and actually go to the schools and start being a voice for your students. That's how we implement change. But I went to that school board meeting. I made it publicly known to every parent that complained on that website when that school board meeting was. And not one parent showed up except for me. That's sad. So, what I learned from that, don't sit there and tell me how much you care about your kids if you're not going to even go to try to defend them in the capacity that you can.
Or really find out what's going on.
Yeah, nobody did. And see, that's the other side of this. I went to the school and I talked to every administrator. I say every administrator, there's one I did not talk to, but I talked to several principals. I talked to the superintendent all the way down. I talked to law enforcement. Nobody, I did not hit one piece of resistance, not one. They were all very polite, respectful, answered my questions, and even admittedly told me some of the issues that they had and the flaws. I can respect that.
Right.
Because as a parent, the most important thing is to me is not necessarily what that cop didn't do at the second, or what the superintendent or principal or the teacher did at that split second. The most important thing to me was my kid's safety. And that school, at the end of the day, whatever their flaws were, that school, part of the school where that stuff happened, was locked down.
Right.
So really, what's the issue? Because your kid got butthurt because they locked it down for the wrong reasons? Who cares? That kid was still in a safer environment than what it could have been if they were outside and there was somebody with an actual gun.
Well, I saw a lot of people too that were getting on there and they were trying to say, I should have been notified, all these things. And my problem with that is, do you not think that's going to make the situation worse?
It would have, and I'll be the first to admit
Dewey,
that.
Oklahoma, showing up with, I imagine a lot of people
I will speak for myself and myself only in this. If I would have got a phone call, said, hey, there is somebody at the school with a gun, I would not have asked any permission from the cop, from the President of the United States all the way down. I will ask for nobody's permission to go to that school. And if I would have showed up to the school, had there been a shooter or some scenario, and it was like Uvalde, and the cops are sitting on their butt in the parking lot, which I'm not saying our officers would do that. I think they would react.
Yeah, me too.
I would go into that school. I don't need anybody's permission. So, what I'm saying by that is there's a lot of parents out there like me, men and women both. And so what is an appropriate time to send those things? Well, there's a proper time and place. But at the time these things happened, heck no, because if that message would have been sent out, I mean, there would have been probably a mass of parents up there in the middle of an investigation while they're looking for an active shooter, possibly, or a potential guy. We're going to say an active shooter, but a guy with a gun on top of this already craziness with everything else going on. Now, who do you identify as the gunman whenever you've got now 30 deranged parents there?
Yeah.
So, that's one of the issues everybody's complaining about. Everybody wants to find something to bitch about, but nobody wants to come up with a solution. And I proposed a solution. A lot of people that are hating me on Facebook because I really don't care. I propose solutions to the school board. And I'll be scheduled for an upcoming meeting in that school board meeting just for that. I do believe that the school is taking this very seriously as is, and it'll probably be, honestly, not a waste of my time, but I have full faith in the school that this is probably already going to be dealt with before I even get to it anyway, because they're taking it seriously like they should, and I have much respect for our administration and staff for doing just that, for taking it seriously and admitting that there was mistakes.
Well, first and foremost, I would say anybody that tries to say that Dewey's an unsafe school district because of something like this is just flat out wrong or not thinking properly. It's definitely one of the safest schools, I think, in this entire area. I think it's a really good school. Although, yeah, they may have handled things a little bit wrong, I think their biggest mistake was just posting it on Facebook as a post rather than sending a mass text or email, some more formal way of communication. Because not everyone's on Facebook, and yes, parents do, I think, deserve to know about a potential situation like that, so they can provide context to their children later on that night whenever they're talking about it.
Well, and I get that. Is Facebook the means for the communication? No, I mean, it was a decision that was made, and again, I'm not faulting of that.
Yeah, it's not the
because
end of the world.
Yeah, again, I think that's where parents are mistaken on this. Is that was the decision that was made by the powers that be? Okay, maybe it was the right or wrong one, whatever their opinion is. But again, I go back to the principle. The principle of the matter, and I'm not saying the principle of school, I'm saying the principle of this issue was, are our kids safe? And in the situation with mine, they were. That's the most important thing. Yeah. We can always come back to the drawing board and say, hey, we should have been notified, because if a notification goes through Twitter, Facebook, a text message, that in no way, shape, or form is going to harm or hurt my kid's livelihood. And so those things are they issues? Yes. Should they be addressed? Most certainly. But that is not a pressing issue because it went out on Facebook. The issue is, were our kids safe?
And having good policies and procedures to make sure that happens.
Sure.
I'm sure, given the fact that the middle school and the high school wasn't locked down, next time they'd probably go ahead and just lock down everything.
Every situation is different, and that's the thing. What morons need to understand in this: not everything's so cut and dry as saying, "Oh, there's a non-emergency or an emergency. It was locked down, not locked down." Because we'll say hypothetical situation, somebody in the high school. Matter of fact, this has happened, and I'm not going to mention names because it's privy information. But somebody got hurt, so they do a non-emergency lockdown. A non-emergency lockdown is what they will do is the kids just roam around the class, they stay where they're at. They still do teaching, they still do these things, and it's a good policy. And the reason being is because they can this particular situation. From what I understand, there had to be medical had to come in and stuff like that. So that makes the hallways clear. The medical staff can get in and out with no obstructions. They can treat the person and go on their way. Do you need to lock down all the other two buildings for that? No, because it's a non-threat. Yeah. Now here's the flip side of that. Well, how come we weren't notified of a non-emergency situation? The same thing I put on Facebook. Wasn't your kid, it's none of your freaking business. So the school doesn't need to be notifying, in my opinion, does not need to notify every time there's an emergency or non-emergency lockdown. Because a lot of the times, it's none of their freaking business.
Are you referring to a high schooler parent not getting that information? Because I do feel like if it's the elementary school, and the elementary school has a non-emergency lockdown, after the fact, maybe wait till close to the end of the day, but then you just send out a text to the parents, hey, there was a...
Well, it depends on what it was. Like today, it's kind of weird that you even bring that up. Today there was a fire alarm that went off at the school. And they sent out messages. I could care less.
Yeah, that's a little much.
But on the same hand, I don't really care about that trivial little bitty stuff. But however, it's nice. Yeah. Hey, there was an incident. Just being informative.
Yeah, it's not bad.
And stuff like that. And I'm sure there'll probably be some hate mail going around that by sometime with little somebody breathes smoke and now they're going to die. Or something stupid, because that's what people do. Just like I said in a couple episodes ago, they all want to hide behind Facebook and in Snapchat and Twitter and all these things. When it comes to being an adult and stepping up to the plate and saying it face to face, what I'm referencing here is going to the school board, going to the powers to be. They're chickens. They sit in their home and complain about it and gripe about it and don't do a darn thing. So don't sit here and tell me you care about your kids, your welfare, the well-being of your kids, if you ain't willing to go challenge it yourself as a parent. Worst thing you're gonna do is go tell you no. Or maybe maybe somebody else comes up with a better policy.
And to me, it kind of gets more into the issue of people want to blame stuff on other people rather than trying to take any responsibility for themselves. And I kind of feel like that's the same thing with guns in these situations. We want to blame guns AR-15s for being the reason why these mass shootings are taking place. But the reality is, it's the person behind the barrel. It's the person with the mental illness, the person who's not getting treated properly in society. That's the real issue, and people don't want to have that discussion. But I think there's a lot in that, although I don't think we can spend an entire episode talking about it, the main point is guns don't kill people. People do.
Well, I disagree with that, because it depends on if you're red or blue. Because when there's a school shooting, it most certainly comes from the Democratic Party for the most part. And I'm not going to label all Democrats the same.
Right.
But they don't ever want to talk about gun policy until something like this happens. And then all of a sudden, it's the gun problem that's in society. It's not, and I agree with you, it's not a gun problem. Because like I said earlier, they'll kill you with whatever. It's whatever. You come into my house and try to rob me, I'm a pretty sane individual. I'm going to pick up the first dang thing I can find, and I'm going to stick it to your freaking face. That's, it sounds gruesome, it sounds bad, but that's what I'm going to do to protect my kids and my family.
Right.
And obviously, they had a gun, it's more convenient, it's right there, but if it's not available, I'm going to protect myself with something, is what I'm getting at.
A pillow.
And so, somebody that has mental issues, probably by the time I'm done talking about this, y'all think I do too, but, they're going to do whatever. It's those rules, the stuff they come up with is retarded. They're stupid. Everybody knows that it's the honest people, which is the vast majority of the people that's obey the laws, that has these guns and stuff like that. All you're doing is punishing them.
Yeah, well, exactly. Is why should normal people be penalized for something that someone with a mental health issue is doing? So to me, it kind of goes into other things. Like you could talk about racism from the past, kind of being similar. People today have to pay for the mistakes of ancestors from long ago, and to me, it's kind of the same thing in the sense of, because of someone with a mental illness, what they're doing, normal people should now be penalized or not be allowed to own this type of weapon.
Yeah, they've already proven this in other countries, that taking guns ain't gonna fix anything. All it's gonna do is, we'll say that gun is $500, just gonna make it more expensive, but people's gonna find a way. They'll get it in.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about someone doing an illegal act, and you're expecting them to follow the law on which weapon they can use.
Exactly.
Come on. And there's enough AR-15s in the world at this point. Good luck getting rid of all of them.
Yeah, you're not going to. And the thing of it is, these things are made out of, practically made of plastic now. Yeah. They're so easily replicated, so easily made. And you're right. There's so many millions of them out there that it's a lost cause. Get over it. Tackle the things we can, and quit teaching our younger generations to be such pansies. And start wearing the britches that you should be wearing, a grown man's pants, a grown woman's pants, and start standing up for things that's right, doing things right, and quit being a baby because you get buttered. Because I know it sounds repetitive, and I know it sounds so, I guess, generic per se to say these things, but that's the problem. We're so thin-skinned. We get butthurt about every little thing, and so some kid, adult, whatever, is like, well, I'm just going to do this mass shooting, whether it be for publicity or whether it be just for revenge. I'm like, I don't even, I can't understand it. And I'll tell you why I can't understand it, because you've got to be mentally handicapped to some capacity. Not handicapped, that's not the right word. Mentally disturbed, to act that way.
Well, and I'll kind of take it a step further, in the sense of politicians and people in power that are trying to restrict gun laws always say that, they talk about how mass shootings happen daily. But the reality of it is that most of these mass shootings, which is defined as either 3 or more people being killed and the shooter not killing himself, or some of them say 4 people or more that are killed without the shooter killing himself. So in that, there's a lot of domestic violence situations and gang-related violence that breaks out, that accounts for well over half, if not over 3/4 of all mass shootings that take place. And then to make an even bigger point beyond that, it's sad that we can talk about mass shootings, but very rarely do we really talk about gun suicides, which account for the most deaths out of all. So how sad is that as a nation we aren't willing to address what is the actual issue? Someone doesn't feel well enough to want to live and try to make it and thrive and make something out of their life. They'd rather take it or take somebody else's. in the process.
Unfortunately, the answer is simple as why they're not getting dealt with, because it's what the politicians particularly want to pull at that time.
Take a pill.
And like a lot of these times, like the stuff in Vegas, they're trying to sue gun companies. It's a lost cause. They've got protection. Bottom line, there's things they're protected.
And they should.
And Colt, Smith and Wesson, Brown, whatever gun company you want, not I say any one of them, their guns didn't just jump off the counter and start shooting people. Somebody was behind the gun that did it. So I guess, really, this is society we live in, unfortunately, and it's sad, and, almost brings me to tears to have to say that, but our kids are coming up in this. I'm in it.
Yeah.
We're all in it. And it's time, just like I've said with other topics we've discussed, is start being a stinking voice for things and quit being a problem to it. So really, this is a topic that could go on for probably hours, so really is, what should we do about it? And I learned some things here recently and stuff like that. One, I think parents need to be involved. If you were going to sit back and hide behind social media and you never can address this or address that or speak, shut up and stay out of it. Let me do what's in the best interest of your kids. Did you hear that? I want people to hear this. If you ain't willing to parent your kids yourself and stand up for what needs to happen in these schools, you're going to have people like me that'll do it for you because you're cowards. And that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because they're going to sit back and be idle, and then they're going to gripe. Well, I don't like the way it was done. Were you at that meeting? Did you have a say? No, because you sit back and you did nothing. So don't sit here and gripe about it on the backside.
And vice versa on the school side. I think that public schools especially, but all schools really, should have a rule or standard in place. And I'm sure on paper it is, but it needs to be in practice as far as any time a emergency lockdown situation takes place, you take it 100% seriously.
Sure.
Even if it is in a close to a border town or whatever, like Uvalde was, because that's why they didn't take it as seriously as they normally do, or at least that's what they're saying. Because they have so many that happen because of illegals coming in and cops chasing them. So what I'm getting at is that every time something like that happens, you treat it like the real thing. And so that way, in that moment, whenever it actually is the real thing, you are prepared for it. Yes. And if a school isn't willing to do that, then I think we need to be cutting their funding.
No, you fire them and find somebody else who will.
Major fines, whatever, something to say we aren't going to stand for this.
Yeah, we should. It's always train. There's a fine line. We don't need it every day as a mass, or
not at all.
An active shooter drill. But we should be training, just like we have tornado drills, we have fire drills. We have these things should be implemented. So when these things happen, and I'll tell these crybaby parents out there that's worried about the little kids that get butter. You know why they are? Because if you teach a kid a daycare incident was brought. I talked to a parent today about a daycare when they have an active shooter drill. They lock them in a closet. That's their protocol. I'm okay with that. At first, the kids are crying. We're locked in a closet in this dark.
Yeah.
But after you've done it enough, the kids are like, "This is, it's a drug. We know." And that's a good thing. And here's why: because at first these kids are going to be bawling, screaming, crying, and won't shut up. What's the point in hiding? The gun knows the rat. However, but as they become accustomed to it, they're going to be more easily to get in there. They're going to be more calm about the situation, and they're going to cooperate because that's a normal thing for them. And chances are that kid's probably not even going to realize something happened. Now, if there's gunshots, that's different.
Changes the scenario.
And we'll worry about that on the back end.
Yeah.
But chances are that kid's not even going to know that it was a drill or not, because they just practice it so much.
Yeah, if they're actually doing it.
Exactly. So, practice. Have policies and procedures in place that every person, that whether it's a business, obviously we're talking about schools, but every person in that school of any capacity, doesn't matter from the youngest to the oldest to the cafeteria worker, if a social worker just happens to be visiting, the secretaries, to every person should know what those policies are. Substitute teachers especially, because substitute teachers are hard to get, and I'm not going to go on a screening process or none of that stuff, but so there's these new people coming in and out, helping out, volunteer, all these people should be trained as part before you step in this school. This is what these protocols are, and you have to know it. That's just part of it. And so that ensures, or help ensure, that in the event something does happen, our kids, and other adults are taken care of in those situations.
Well, and the last point that I would make on this is we need to hold people in positions of power accountable. And if they aren't doing the job properly, if they aren't taking care of business and protecting our children and protecting our communities like they're supposed to, then sue them for $27 billion. You know, make them feel the pain that you have to feel every day that you don't have a child anymore because someone was too scared to make a decision for themselves to save lives.
Well, there's, yeah, I understand your hard-pressed point on that, but there's a bigger picture than that. Because we'll just say hypothetical, well, this situation with Uvalde is what you do. Who's really suffering? I'll tell you who it is, the taxpayers.
Ultimately,
When you sue the city, sue the county, guess where that money's coming from?
More tickets.
You know, so now, obviously, should they be compensated? There should be something done. Should they hold them? Personally, I don't know. I don't even know if it's a law, but maybe there should be criminal charges for cops that won't do their freaking job.
Yeah, I'm sure there is, or I would hope.
You
and
know,
if not, then yeah, maybe
so
let's start there.
like, if you're gonna do that, yeah, there should be consequences. If you're, and hide behind a badge, and not utilize it the way you're supposed to, you're a freaking coward. You shouldn't be wearing it. It's a disgrace and it's a dishonor as far as I'm concerned. It's like a guy wearing a military uniform, stolen valor. No, it's not right. And so, yeah, they should be held accountable for those things. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that parents need to do. They need to step up. They need to make sure there's policies in place and procedures. Understand what those are. That way, whenever you're, yet again, I'd go back into what I discussed. Well, we need to know how to deal with these things at home. Really? You don't even know what the policies are. So how dare you sit there and say you're going to try to deal with it at home and calm down your little child, because what are you going to calm down on? Yeah. You don't even know what the policies are. And I know they don't. You know how I know that? I'm not speaking out of line. People, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I do. Because I'm the only person that went up there. Now, I'm sure because of my social media handles and as many people as I pissed off, yeah, there's more people that's called, and there's more people that, they've reached out to me too. But every person, even the ones that I was crapping on the internet, when they reached out to me, I was polite, I was courteous, I spoke to them, and they were too. We had good conversation.
Yeah, which is usually how it works when you meet somebody.
And so, even everybody can take it, I'm hating on all these people. It's not the case. I'll entertain those conversations with you, but I'll tell you what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to fight somebody else's freaking fight. I am going to deal with this in the aspect of the 4 kids that I have at that school. I'm not doing this for any other parent.
Well, because it's an individual responsibility. If something's going on in your child's life, it's your responsibility to do something about
Exactly.
it. Whether it's grades aren't getting put into the system right, the student isn't being given enough attention, whatever's going on, as a school, that's kind of what you're paid to do is to give them the best chance at learning and thriving. And until we start doing that as an individual for your child, this is going to continue to happen over and over.
The bottom line of it is, with these situations, from any staff member, law enforcement at the school, I was approached, or the way I was handled was very professional, polite, courteous. They answered my questions, had no hesitation doing it, even admitted faults. So my challenge, the parents, in any situation, I'm not referencing right now, in this situation, I'm telling all of them, because the bottom line of it is who they work for. You. They're ultimately paid by tax. So if this teacher is acting a certain way, then again, how do you recourse that? You go to the school board, you put it in front of the school board people and say, hey, this is how your teacher's acting. Fire them. You don't like the way the cop's doing things? There's ways to deal with that. You file complaints with the police department, not Facebook.
Yeah, you do your part. That's what it comes down to.
You can go on Facebook all you want to, and it ain't going to do nothing. Call Fox 23 268, whatever you want. Well, they can only take things so far. Why are you making everybody else, the news stations, the police departments, everything else, be your bad guy and do your dirty work for you? Quit being coward parents and step up to the plate and start parenting your kids and start standing up for what's right in society and doing what's right and advocating. Teach your kids to be a young man. Teach your kids to be a young woman and lead by example, and quit leading by being a coward.
Well, really wouldn't be leading then.
Well, they're leading the way and showing them what I'm saying is leading them down the road, the same repetitive path that everybody else is on, and that's why nothing's changed. That's why these things happen.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, man. It's a topic that can go on forever, but I hope that ultimately something like this kind of gives people clarity that at the end of the day, bad things like this happen, yes, but if we're more vigilant as communities, looking out for one another and helping one another, you can start to address these issues, both in your own home, but also in your schools and, you know, your community around you.
Sure.
So with that, thanks everybody for watching. Bye.